Hello, welcome to my podcast. Now, this is a conversation with lots of people I really admire. It's a chat about success, health, and happiness, and I know you're going to enjoy it. So, without further delay, let's get started now. So, Rob, is there a formula for wealth? And if so, what is it?
Is there a formula for wealth? It comes back to this success thing, doesn't it? And some people are made happy by wealth. Some people are, can have nothing at all and are still happy. So I think it's a wealth of happiness rather than wealth of monetary things. Because who am I to say that if somebody's happy with a certain level of financial independence versus somebody who's a billionaire, which one's better? That's impossible to answer, isn't it? So at the end of the day, as far as we're aware, we're only here once. You've got to enjoy the journey. You want to look back when you're on your deathbed, when you're 90, I wouldn't have had it any other way. So I think it's wealth of purpose and wealth of happiness as opposed to monetary, wealth.
Wow. Oh my goodness. So do you think you could be happy without financial independence?
Well, I think that, so what do I think? I think that money doesn't make you happy, but I do think if you have poverty or you have a certain level of money which is below being able to live a reasonable life, then I think that can make you unhappy. So money doesn't make happiness, but being poor, I think, can make you unhappy. So as long as you have a certain level of income, and that can be different for different people, as long as you have a certain level of income, then I think you can achieve the same level of happiness.
Wow, that is wonderfully insightful, really good. So we talked about Stephen Covey a bit already, but if you were to write his book, what would you say the habits of highly effective people are from your perspective?
Well, that's a very long book, and there's lots of information in it. but I just think if you're going to run a business with more than one person, you need to have some leadership skill. Yes, you can point and you can say do this and do that, but I think a more effective form of leadership is the ability to lead people willingly, so they're not forced to do anything. And the way you do that is you crystallise their enthusiasm around a goal, don't you? And I think just understanding what people's personal goals are and trying to align them with the business, I think that automatically drives success. So I think being able to crystallise a team and get the best out of a team is my measure of some measure of success.
Fantastic. Amazing. So Rob, I've thought about this word a lot over the years and I've drawn opinions about it, but I'm curious to know what you think. What do you think about competitiveness? And is this a trait that an entrepreneur needs in his or her personality, and why?
I think it is. This is quite a forceful statement, but I make it to try and drill home the point. But business is effectively legalised warfare, isn't it? You are at war with your competitors, and in the capitalistic system, then there are winners and losers. So if you want your business to win, then I think you do have to have a competitive edge, and I think getting a competitive edge in young people is quite important. You don't want to be the overly the tiger mom or the overly pushy parent, but kids playing competitive sport at school and sort of acquiring the will to win, I think that's quite important to at least gives people the opportunity early in their lives to experience that, because winning is a fantastic feeling, isn't it? And I'd certainly rather win than lose. So I do think a competitive spirit is important, because it's a battle. Your business has got to win, and that means that other businesses maybe don't win. And I think you're more likely to be successful in business if you do have a competitive edge.
It's interesting, very interesting, because you can't find a business plan template without an analysis of the competition, can you? But I've noticed you, and I've seen you in a lot of social circles. I've seen you just in life, and there's a calmness in you wherein I've seen other people with a competitive nature, if I'm honest. I've seen to observe other people, oh, your shoes are shinier than mine, or this or that. And I have observed that you don't tend to seem to measure yourself against other people. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, there's being competitive and wanting to win, and there's also being envious, isn't there? And those are two different things. So I don't think you need to be envious to be competitive. I don't think you necessarily need to knock anybody down to be top dog. Your business does need to succeed, and that might be that your competitors don't succeed. But I don't think it's driven out of envy. I think it's driven out of a competitive, an instinctive competitiveness, maybe that you've developed early in life. You have experienced, running the 100 metres in the school egg and spoon race or something, and winning and getting that nice feeling and wanting to repeat that feeling. So I think you do need to be competitive, but that isn't at the expense of knocking somebody else down or being envious of somebody else's position. US, UK, we have sort of different cultures on sort of praising success. In the UK, sometimes it's envy. In the States, it's good on you. You're successful. I want to be like you. I'm not trying to knock you down or bring you down. So I think we could learn a lot in the UK of the American can-do spirit.
And we can learn a lot from your humility as well.
You said it, not me.
For sure. Okay. So Rob, this whole capital investor thing, it was new to me when I came into the business school environment. And I've heard negative connotations associated with it. Mm-hmm. So people think of them as, cutthroat, quite vicious, money-driven, and things like that. So I know you as a capital investor, and I know that you're not like that. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity to speak for yourself.
Yeah. Right, okay. So, the venture capital world is a broad church, isn't it? And we've all seen Dragon's Den, I'm sure, and there are some dragons out there. But if you work for a reasonable firm that do things in the right way, then they try and have a win-win. So what they do is they invest money in good teams and try and mentor and encourage them to make money for themselves and, by default, make money for the investor. So again, when we teach the MBAs, VC and PE, venture capital and private equity, then you'll always hear from all the people that come to talk who've had, Roger Colwell's been in the industry longer than I have, 35 years odd, and he will always talk about alignment of interest. So if you and I are aligned, it's likely that you will know where we're going and you'll want to go in that direction. If you and I aren't aligned, then that's going to be difficult, isn't it? So what the investor is always trying to do is align interests with the management team, and first of all align financial interests, and then align purpose of the business, ethics, culture, all the rest of it. So it's just important to have alignment of interest. There are times when there isn't an alignment. The team have put together a plan and the plan hasn't been delivered, and the business needs to be rescued and we need to put more money in. So investors are very reluctant to put more money into a business if it hasn't worked without something changing. Because if you put more money into a business without something changing, you're probably going to get the same result. So where this sort of hard edge comes from is if the business plan hasn't worked and more money is required to rescue the business, then something needs to change. That can be strategy, that can be product, but sometimes it's people. So sometimes we have to change the finance director. Sometimes we have to change the managing director. Sometimes we have to change the chair. But if the business plan hasn't been delivered and the business is asking for more cash, you wouldn't keep on putting money into a black hole without something changing. So it's nothing personal, it's business, it's for the good of everybody. If somebody can't do the job for any reason, they're probably very stressed. It's probably better they make way for somebody else. So that's where this hard edge comes from. You have to have the hard edge sometimes for good of the overall business. If a body, if your right foot is gangrenous, pretty unfortunate, but you have to chop your right foot off. You have to save the body, don't you? You have to take some pretty drastic action. So I think that's where this coldness comes from. Usually it's not. It's about aligning interests, but on occasion, if things don't go well, we have to change something. And that unfortunately can be people.
Wow, it's interesting. I mean, when you think about the good of the whole, as opposed to sacrificing one element, then it does kind of make sense.
Well, you could argue that if the MD isn't working and there are 25 people in the business, you sort of owe it to the other 24 to grasp the nettle and sort it out, don't you? It's very unfortunate for the 25th, but it's probably good for the other 24. So you have to consider the whole when making decisions and not shirk from them.
Wow, it's a responsible decision then. It requires bravery even.
Yes, but if as long as you do it in the right way and you explain that things aren't working, if it's not working, the person themselves will know it's not working. And they are often relieved to be relieved of that responsibility. So you can sometimes see a weight being lifted off their shoulders. And it's a square peg in a round hole, isn't it? They need to go and find a round hole for a round peg. So very often they move on to be successful in some other field of activity.
So Rob, it's very interesting. So I've never really asked you what you think about social enterprises. We hear the term, it's buzzing around more and more all the time. We see more social enterprises developing. Do you have an opinion on social enterprises? And if so, what do you think makes one of them successful?
I think social enterprises are a good thing. I think people who run them have a purpose very often. I don't differentiate too much between a social enterprise and a normal business. Why? Because a normal business has to make money. It has to deliver cash and profit. And then the difference is what you do with the cash and profit. A normal business would pay dividends or bonuses. A social enterprise is a business. It has to make a profit. It has to generate cash. The difference is what you do with the profits. So a social enterprise they are limited to the amount of cash that can go out to the business in terms of dividends. I can't remember the exact percentage, but they are limited. And if the business is sold, the cash has to be recycled for the same purpose. You can't sell a social enterprise and then go and do something completely different with the cash. So they are the same up until what you do with the money. Normal business pay dividends, social enterprise reinvest in business. So they're the same apart from the choice about where the cash goes.
Very interesting, very, very interesting. So you don't really differentiate between the two that much.
They have to have the same business plan, the same practices. They have to have a purpose. They have to recruit decent people, etc., etc. The difference is what you can do with the cash. You can sell the business and pocket the profit as a normal business. You can't do that with a social enterprise. It has to be locked into that purpose. So that, as far as I understand it, is the difference.
Amazing. And I don't think many people have heard that. I think people think about the surface or the mission or purpose, but not necessarily the core of what happens with the funds afterwards.
No, you can't do good as a social enterprise unless you're viable and sustainable. So you have to have the normal business practices, as far as I can see.
Fantastic. Okay, so Rob, this is a bit gooey, but when I think of a man of integrity, you are genuinely the first person I think of. I mean, you would even tell me honestly if you thought something did not meet a level of integrity, or if you thought something was right or wrong. You've always been very clear on trying to, walk the path of ethics, always. So how did you develop that character trait? I mean, I wonder if you agree with me. And then, has your integrity been tested over the years? And if so, how did you overcome the test? So that's a loaded question.
I haven't always succeeded, but I think most people know what the right thing to do is, don't they, in their sort of soul. And there can be opinions about whether that's right or not, and we can have different opinions, but at least I would feel it's the right thing to do, and you would feel it's the right thing to do, but that might be different. So I think as long as you are true to yourself, if an investor has to change something, then as long as you feel that you're saving the body by chopping off a bit of the leg, then I can live with that decision. Has my integrity ever been tested? We had a situation recently where, and this isn't in the VC business, this is a personal investment with 3 of the shareholders. And we formed a business. It didn't go quite according to plan. And as a result, we lost money, but the other party lost more money. And we had to throw money at the problem to sort it out, and it's cost us, a 6-figure sum. The other party didn't feel quite the same about it, because it was, if you like, they hadn't got surplus cash, or they hadn't got rainy day money. So we acted with integrity because we had the finances to sort it out. If we hadn't had the finances to sort it out, would we have acted in the same way? I hope we would have done. But when you're down to your last bean, to make sure something is resolved in a proper manner, there are alternative courses of action, aren't there? That you skip your responsibility because it's going to cost you less, and therefore you're not down to your last bean. So I haven't been tested where I've been down to my last bean. I hope I would act with integrity should that ever happen. I don't know, question mark, because everything's got a price, hasn't it? We had the luxury of acting with integrity because we weren't bankrupt. If somebody was, would act in the same way? Don't know. I hope it would, but we'll see.
It's interesting because around this topic of money and wealth, I've heard a quote over the years that wealth doesn't corrupt a person. It just kind of puts a spotlight on who they already were.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
So if you're a bit of a schemer, when you've got 5 pounds, you're probably gonna be a big time schemer when you got a lot more.
Yes, we can all name those, can't we? We perhaps shouldn't. But yes, I mean, you know the dodgy dealers, don't you? Even if they are, they have a certain amount of cash, and if they become very wealthy, you still think they're a little bit on the edge. And I'm sure we can think of a few high-profile examples of that. But leopards and spots, isn't it? Does anybody really, after the age of about 20, when your personality is pretty fully formed, do you have a transformation in who you really are? And does money transform who you really are? not sure about that.
Wow, it's very interesting. Very, very interesting. So I think about humility a lot because I think of it as one of those, or I think of pride, which is what I think of as the alternative to humility. I think of it as a sneaky little thing that can kind of, get involved and you don't even realize you may be acting in a haughty way. So I'm always kind of conscious of humility as a word because I never want to come across otherwise. So how do you define humility, Rob? And what place do you feel this trait has in a successful man or woman?
Well, I think humility, I think, can be very useful. I think that when you meet somebody, if you've got the genuine person, don't you? You can tell if they're putting on a front or not. And again, we've all met those sorts of people, the corporate sort of smoothers. So you can't scratch the surface, can you? So when you meet somebody, you get a bit of a feeling whether it's the genuine article or not, or whether you know the real person. But if you put on a front and you don't act with humility, certainly if you're an investor, somebody doesn't really open up to you. So the job of an investor is to, and I always remember when I worked for 3i, when I walked in the office every morning, there was a great picture on the wall, and it had a mannequin face and a big sort of semicircle, and then there were 2 ears and 1 mouth. And then underneath it said, we believe in using these in the proportions that they were intended, meaning you should listen twice as much as you speak. So if you meet somebody and they don't demonstrate humility and they're all sort of projection and me, then most people just close down, don't they? They just let them talk and they just, nice to meet you, Terry, and they move on. So those people don't tend to learn anything. Whereas if you just act as a normal Joe, irrespective of your background, you probably connect with somebody better, and they probably open up to you better. They talk and you talk, and they listen and you listen, and it's a fairly balanced conversation, and you learn stuff and they learn stuff. So if you're trying to assess a situation, be it a business situation or a personal situation, then if you use this twice as much as you use this, then you're going to be up, because you don't learn anything. I'm doing a lot of talking now, but I'm not learning anything because I already know because I'm talking, whereas I'd much rather be asking the questions because I just find it more interesting. So act with humility, you'll learn a lot more, listen really carefully, talk not a lot, and then you can judge situations better.
Wow, I love that. I had a professor once years ago who told me that most tragedies or problems can be drilled down to a lack of listening. So I thought it was an interesting statement. I don't know if it's true or not, but I've thought about that over the years.
Yeah, well, there's the expression, it's good to talk, isn't it? And sometimes I don't do that. If somebody has, if there's been a situation which I feel is sort of irreparable, then one of my faults is that I won't talk to make up. If somebody's burnt their bridges, then that's it. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. But if I feel I've been slighted or somebody has deceived me, then there's quite a lot of coming back from that. Maybe I should be more tolerant of that, I don't know. But I would agree with the basic premise that if there is an issue and it isn't irreparable, then just talk about it.
Wow, it takes a strong person to be able to talk through problems, admit when they're wrong, listen, learn.
Yeah, and sometimes I don't meet that high bar. Sometimes there's been situations where I don't think they're retrievable. So it's just easy not to go there, isn't it? And I have done that once or twice. Now, whether that's right or wrong, I don't know.
Well, you've done pretty well, Rob. So I think you've hit more home runs than not.
Pays to be lucky, doesn't it?
You've done well. So this is an interesting one. I really want to hear your answer to this. I've read that having respect for money is essential to building wealth. What do you think about this concept?
Yes, I think that's important. I'd sort of slightly change the question if I can. I think it's very important for young people especially to have an awareness of finances. Start with personal finances. What is a loan? Why is it important to bring more cash in than you spend? And I don't think, certainly I wasn't taught this at school, we didn't have any lessons on personal finance. I didn't know what a mortgage was. I didn't know what a lease was. How do you go and buy a car and borrow money for a car, etc., etc. So I think there's a lot that we could do, given that we're supposed to be an entrepreneurial nation. There's a lot we can do to just get people more up to speed with learning about finance and respecting money. To sort of segue back to your original question. And I think that if people did that, then people would realise that you do need to save some money for a rainy day. You need to try and be self-reliant if you possibly can be. You need to spot oncoming roadblocks and try and work around them. And having an appreciation of the monetary consequences of decisions, I think, is quite important. But a simple, cash flow, cash in, cash out, wages. You can't spend anything on drink this week. You've got to wait till next week. Those sort of things, I think, we should teach at a much younger age.
Wow, and maybe that's what they're talking about, this whole respect for money concept.
Maybe, who knows?
Wow, well done. Okay, so what are your thoughts on failure?
Thoughts on failure. Certainly, as an investor, I remember when I first got into venture capital. After the first year, we had a visit from the area manager, and went around the table. Who's made some good investments this year? Hand goes up and. Right, who's made some failures? And somebody put their hand up, and we talked about that, and I didn't put my hand up. And the guy said, Rob, have you had any failures this year? I said, no. He said, well, you're not taking enough risk. He said, that means that if you haven't had any failures, you've missed some really good opportunities that were a bit risky, and we could have made money out of those. So I thought, blimey, that's an interesting thing to say. Because I thought, fantastic, no failures, that's a good thing. But it wasn't, because we're a risk investor. Risk and return. It's okay taking a big risk if you get a big return, but if you take a big risk, sometimes that return doesn't come off and you get a failure. But you don't get the big returns unless you take a bit of risk. So I think that you should take risk. This thing that we did as a business a little while ago, this hasn't really worked and it's cost us some money. But it's the right thing to do, and we're going to do it again in a different way, so that we don't make, hopefully, we don't make the same mistake again. So I think you should take risk. You should accept that if you take risk, there will be some failures. That's an occupational hazard, and I think you just dust yourself down, you learn from it, and you try and not make the same mistake again. But both personally and in business, you have to take risk, and you just you have to manage the downside and try and minimise the downside. But you will have failures, so I don't think that's a bad thing as long as you learn from it. If you keep on making the same mistake over and over and over, then that is a bad thing. But as long as you learn from those mistakes, then I think that's a good thing. And I think you should have an element. You can't have one success and 10 failures, but if you have 10 successes and 1 or 2 failures, that's fine, because overall you're up, and you should take some risk, and you're going to get some failures.
Interesting. I think sometimes people try to avoid risk their entire life.
Well, you miss out on potential good upside, don't you?
Absolutely, absolutely. Have you ever experienced a failure?
I've just talked about it, and we're learning from it, and we'll hopefully move on. We are going to do address the same problem in a slightly different way, and in a slightly, hopefully, a better way.
Good, good. Well, we'll look to see how it turns out then. Rob, I've always admired your punctuality. So how important do you feel this habit is, and explain the value of punctuality to you?
I think it's very important. I mean, why do I think it's important? Because time is very valuable, and once it's spent, you can never get it back. And if you and I agree to meet at 11 o'clock, and you're there on time and I'm 5 minutes late, then what am I saying? I'm saying my time, Terry, is more important than your time. You know, I had to do a job on the way, and I kept you waiting 5 minutes. You were here doing nothing, waiting for me. So, you know, my time's more important than yours. And I don't think that's fair. So I'm always punctual because, I always try to be punctual because I think it's disrespectful to other people's time if you're not. Because you're effectively saying that your time is more important than theirs because you kept them waiting. So time is very valuable.
Time is very valuable. They say it's the only commodity we can never replace.
Well, you can't repeat it, can you? It's gone. You know,
No.
that moment's gone now. You never get it back.
That's right. So we've got to spend it wisely.
We have.
And along those same lines, is there a good morning routine for someone who wants to win? What are your thoughts on this?
The answer is probably. I mean, my morning routine is having 2 strong coffees. Some people go down the gym, don't they? And that's does it for them. So again, slightly change the question. I think there are certain times of the day that you're more productive. So I'm a morning person. So if I've got a really difficult thing to do that I've been putting off, then I get up early to do it because then there's no distractions, and I feel I'm at my best at 8 in the morning or something. Whereas some people, you know, they're more productive at 11 o'clock at night, aren't they? And you know, people who write novels, you know, they burn the midnight oil sometimes, don't they? Because they're more productive. They're in the flow. So what I would say is just find out, you know, what time of day you're most effective at, and then any really difficult things do in that effective time slot. Because I can tackle things at 8 in the morning that I couldn't possibly tackle at 5 in the evening because I'm just too tired. So just work out when's the best time to tackle really big jobs, and then do it in that time slot.
Very good. It means that you're maximizing your time, aren't you?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
There is. I was told not to interrupt you, so I'm going to interrupt you now. But there's a book called a free PDF download called Eat the Frog, and this is just to digress for a minute. You've got a plate of food, and you've got some potatoes and meat, and meat and 2 veg, and you've got a frog, and you've got to eat everything on your plate. What do you do? Do you eat the frog first, or do you eat the frog last? If you eat the frog first, at least you enjoy the rest of the meal. Whereas if you eat the frog last, you don't enjoy the meal because you've got to eat the frog. So what I try and do is I try and get the worst thing out the way first in the day, because then it means I've eaten the frog and I can enjoy the rest of the day or the rest of the meal. So so that's my particular way of dealing with eating frogs or dealing with difficult situations.
Yeah, I love that advice. That's Brian Tracy.
Yeah, so well done. You've remembered the author.
Yes, he's fantastic. What is a great man or woman?
Somebody who has a purpose, and in doing that purpose makes them happy.
Okay, so Rob, I want you to take your time with this one, though. What do you want your legacy to be?
Okay, so I think probably a good listener, and try to share the experiences with younger people. I mean, if you're, I was doing this analysis on myself. So a pharmacist helps people through medicine. Yeah. I wanted to be a doctor, didn't end up been able to be a doctor, so I ended up being a pharmacist. But I wanted to help people. Being a venture capitalist, I would argue, is a desire to help people. Help people in business and make them wealthy. And being a university lecturer is also helping people, isn't it? So I think that the fundamental trait is wanting to help and mentor people. So I think that would be my legacy.
And that makes you happy?
Makes me happy.
Fantastic. And this is a funny one that just jumped into my brain for some reason. But complete the following sentence as a word of advice to a close friend.
Yeah.
When you see a blank, run the other way as fast as you can.
Well, when you see an investment opportunity that's too good to be true, run the other way as quickly as you can.
Words of the wise. And then finally, I'm a nutritionist and I have a great interest in health, but I also believe that successful people also find that health is a priority for them. I've observed that. Do you agree? And if so, could you elaborate on your view of the connection between wealth and health?
Well, I agree with the premise. So I think to feel healthy, you need to eat well. And just a metaphor. If you've got a car and you put dirty petrol in the car, then probably the engine won't work properly and you're going to break down. So I do think it's important to not put contaminated petrol in yourself. In terms of your own fuel tank. Try and eat as well as you can and you can afford. Avoid toxins where you can, because otherwise you won't give your best during the day. And if you've only got 24 hours to spend every day and try and do something useful in that time, it's probably best to feel as tip-top as possible. And the way to do that is to have decent fuel in the tank.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'll finish with this short story. I was reading a book on success one time as a teenager, and an older gentleman, he walked up to me, he observed the cover of the book. It was called What Makes the Great Great. And he quizzed me. He said, what do you think is your most valuable asset? So I threw out a couple of guesses and nothing I said was correct. And then he said, the most valuable thing you have is your health, because if you lose your health, nothing else matters.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. And the older you get, the more important that is as well.
Yeah.
And if you've abused your body in the younger days, then it does come back to haunt you. I mean, I played rugby at school, and I was initially a hooker, which is the centre of the scrum, which is the worst place in the team for neck injury, and I've crushed a couple of vertebrae in my neck. So my left hand is constant pins and needles from an injury when I was 17. So I wouldn't be a hooker sort of if I had my time again. So within reason, take a bit of risk, of course, and the risks of playing rugby versus the benefit of playing rugby, it's far more in the benefit. But just be a little bit cautious, because the more injuries you have, and the more you abuse your body when you're younger, you get lots of aches and pains when you're this sort of age.
And you have such an amazing life to enjoy. So, Rob, thank you so much for this interview. It means so much that you were my first podcast guest, and I just wish you a continued life of wealth and success and happiness.
Great, and I've enjoyed it, so thank you very much. It's been very, very, very interesting and hopefully thought-provoking for the listener.
Yes, I'm sure it will be. Okay.
Great, thank you very much.